They seated me at table 12, tucked behind a towering arrangement of roses and hydrangeas, so thick it could have hidden a marching band. From where I sat, I could barely see the stage, much less my own daughter in her lace gown. The usher smiled politely as if it were a favor, but the truth was clear. I was being hidden like an embarrassing detail no one wanted guests to notice. I straightened my grandmother's pearl necklace and folded my hands. The picture of dignity. My name is Clara Beaumont, 70 years old, widow of Charles Beaumont, a man who once commanded half the shipping lanes along the Gulf Coast. Yet, here in New Orleans, at my only daughter's wedding, I was placed out of sight like a relic too fragile for display. "Mom, you look acceptable," Isabel had whispered earlier, distracted, rushing to the makeup chair before the ceremony. Acceptable. As though I were a participation trophy in human form. I had smiled, said nothing, and let her float away in her great-grandmother's lace gown, radiant as every bride believes herself to be. But from my corner, I studied the room. Marcus's family, the Crosses, swept in like royalty, dripping jewels and exuding entitlement. His mother, Patricia, wore diamonds large enough to catch the chandelier's fire. She air-kissed anyone with influence and sailed past me without even a glance, as though I were a piece of furniture instead of the mother of the bride. And then there was Julian Cross, my new son-in-law, tall, immaculately dressed, with that dazzling politician smile he switched on and off like stage lights. He had different smiles, I noticed. A wide, confident grin for wealthy guests, a polite but cool expression for those with some use but little glamour. And for the rest, people like me, he offered nothing at all. During cocktail hour, I watched him work the crowd like a chess master. The mayor's cousin, a double handshake and booming laugh, a retired judge, effusive charm, promises of lunch next week. And then, catching me in the mirror across the hall, he hesitated. His eyes flickered, recalibrating. "Mrs. Beaumont," he said smoothly, appearing at my table as though summoned. That blinding smile aimed straight at me now. "Isn't this magical? Your daughter looks breathtaking, and the whole evening, well, it's perfect, don't you think?" I answered with the sweetest smile I could muster, a touch too sweet. "Oh, I'm practically vibrating with maternal joy, though the view from here is a bit obstructed." He didn't miss a beat. "I was hoping we could spend some time together soon, a private dinner perhaps, just the two of us. I have some ideas about how we might collaborate as family." Family collaboration. My. How ominously vague. "How refreshing," I murmured, fanning myself with my napkin like some southern belle with the vapors. "Most people manage that before the wedding, but I admire your creativity." A pause. Barely noticeable, but I caught it. The crack in his perfect facade. "Thursday evening, then," he pressed. "There's a very private place downtown. Excellent for meaningful conversations." I inclined my head as though delighted. "Why, Julian, I can hardly wait." As he swept away to charm more lucrative prospects, I caught my reflection again. A silver-haired widow in a modest gray dress, tucked away behind roses, appearing fragile, overlooked, unthreatening. Exactly the image I had been cultivating for years. Too bad for Julian Cross. He thought he'd married into a family of easy marks. What he didn't know was that I had secrets of my own, very expensive secrets. And this harmless widow was about to become the most dangerous opponent he'd ever face. Thursday evening came dressed in damp New Orleans air, heavy with magnolia and river mist. I chose my outfit with deliberate precision. A simple black dress that whispered modest respectability, paired with pearl earrings worn enough to suggest I still clung to sentiment rather than wealth. My late husband Charles used to say dressing was half the battle. You must always look like the part you want people to mistake you for. Tonight, my part was helpless widow. The restaurant Julian selected sat in the French Quarter, the kind of place where the waiters pronounced water as if it were an imported delicacy and eyed you with disdain if you didn't order a bottle that required a 3-syllable flourish. Julian was already seated when I arrived, rising from his chair with theatrical gallantry. "Clara," he said, pulling out my chair, "you look absolutely radiant." Radiant. A word he probably used on every wealthy widow within 50 miles. We ordered wine. He insisted on a vintage that likely cost more than my entire month's grocery bill, And once the glasses were poured, Julian leaned in, lowering his voice to the confidential register men use when they want you to believe you're being let in on a secret. "How are you managing, truly, since Charles passed?" he asked, swirling his glass like a man auditioning for sommelier theater. "Oh, I get by," I replied lightly. 70 years of practice makes almost anything survivable." He chuckled politely. Of course. But surely it's overwhelming sometimes. The house, the bills, the decisions. These things can be, well, a burden for someone in your situation." My situation. Widowhood, spoken like a disease. He reached into his leather briefcase, with the flourish of a magician producing a rabbit. Out came a neat manila folder, laid carefully between our wine glasses. "What's this?" I asked, though I already knew. "Just some paperwork," he said smoothly. "Nothing dramatic. Simple safeguards, power of attorney, medical directives, financial oversight. It's all about protection, Clara, ensuring your independence isn't compromised by unsavory characters." I opened the folder, turning pages with feigned curiosity. Each document stripped me further. Power of attorney transferring to Julian and Isabel, financial control in their names, medical authority to decide where I lived, even whether I received treatment. Complete control, disguised as tender concern. "This is quite comprehensive," I said softly, laying my hand on the folder like it might burn me. Julian smiled, the rehearsed smile of a man closing a deal. "My attorney specializes in elder care. He's guided dozens of families. It's common sense, really. Better to arrange these things before complications arise." "Complications," I echoed, "like me retaining my independence." His smile faltered for half a second, then reappeared. "Exactly. If you sign, you'll never have to worry again." I looked him in the eye, letting my own smile spread slowly, like syrup over cornbread. "Well, Julian, I'll certainly want to review this with my own legal counsel." That flicker again, the crack in his perfect mask. "Of course," he said quickly, "but I do recommend prompt action. Timing matters. Delays raise questions about capacity." Capacity. The word chilled me more than the air conditioning. He wasn't just circling my fortune, he was laying groundwork to declare me incompetent. I closed the folder gently. "I'll think it over." Julian's gaze sharpened. "It would be best to handle this efficiently. Tonight, even." I tilted my head, sweet as sugar. "Surely a man as prepared as you brought a notary, then." His eyes widened, just for an instant. The mask slipped. "How did you—" "Lucky guess," I murmured. "You strike me as someone who plans ahead." The waiter arrived, mercifully cutting the tension. When he left, Julian forced his smile back into place. "Of course, Clara. Take your time." But his eyes told me the truth. Time was the last thing he intended to give me. As I walked out into the warm New Orleans night, I realized something with perfect clarity. Julian Cross thought he was the hunter. He had no idea he'd just walked straight into my game. By Wednesday evening, I had the uneasy sense of a storm rolling in. The city air was damp, restless, as if New Orleans herself knew something unpleasant was about to arrive at my door. Sure enough, at exactly 7 o'clock, the doorbell rang, and there he was, Julian Cross, standing on my porch with his briefcase, and that smile so carefully polished it gleamed even in the gaslight. "Clara," he said warmly, stepping inside as if he owned the place. "I thought we might continue our discussion in a more comfortable setting." Comfortable. That was his word for private, where no witnesses could hear him press his advantage. I led him into Charles's old study, a room lined with dark mahogany bookshelves and smelling faintly of pipe tobacco. Julian spread his papers across the desk like a dealer setting out cards, each one a little more poisonous than the last. "I've revised the documents slightly," he said. "Streamlined, more efficient. You'll see. It's all in your best interest." I perched on the edge of the armchair, folding my hands, appearing every inch the cautious, overwhelmed widow he imagined me to be. "Julian," I said softly, "tell me something. What exactly qualifies you to manage another person's life?" The question caught him off guard. His smile flickered. "Well, I have extensive business experience." "In what field?" financial services, investment management, various positions. His words were vague, slippery. How many elderly people have you advised? I pressed. He shifted uncomfortably. Advised isn't the right word. More like protected. Protected them by suggesting they sign over their rights? The room fell quiet. Only the ticking of Charles's brass clock filled the silence. Julian's jaw tightened. I think there may be some misunderstanding about my intentions. Oh, I understand your intentions perfectly, I said, my voice dropping low, steel beneath the softness. What I'm curious about are your methods. His mask cracked then, hairline fractures spreading across that flawless exterior. You're making serious accusations, Clara. I'm making serious observations, I replied. Observations about a predator who made a very serious mistake. His eyes narrowed. What mistake? I leaned forward, lowering my voice until it could have cut glass, assuming I was just another helpless widow. The color drained from his face. You don't know what you're talking about. Oh, but I do. In fact, I gestured to the bookshelf where a small red light blinked faintly. I've been recording every word you've said since you walked through my door. Julian's head whipped around, his calm shattering. You what? And I've already handed copies to someone who knows exactly how to use them. For the first time since I'd met him, Julian Cross looked truly afraid. His hands trembled as he shoved papers back into his briefcase. This isn't over, he hissed. No, I said, rising from my chair with deliberate calm. It's only just beginning. He stormed out, slamming the door behind him, leaving the study vibrating with his rage. I stood there in the silence, the ticking of Charles's clock louder than ever. My late husband used to say, the most dangerous opponents are the ones everyone underestimates. Julian Cross had just learned that truth the hard way, and I had just decided to stop playing defense. As I turned toward the bookcase, my eyes caught something I had never noticed before, a hairline seam in the paneling, just wide enough to suggest a hidden compartment. My heart quickened. Charles Beaumont had always been cleverer than he let on. Perhaps it was time to see exactly what secrets he had left me. The moment Julian's car disappeared down the street, I turned back to Charles's study. The hairline seam in the paneling wasn't just my imagination. It ran vertically, almost imperceptible against the grain of the wood. I pressed along it, searching, until my fingers brushed against a small brass catch cleverly disguised as part of the molding. With a click, the panel slid open. Behind it, sunk into the wall, was a steel door. My breath caught. I knew instantly what it was. Charles's safe, the one he'd joked about for decades, though I had never seen it. He used to laugh, saying, "One day, Clara, when the time's right, you'll know." Well, the time was most certainly right. The key had been on his old chain for years. A heavy little thing I'd kept in the top drawer, like a relic. My hand shook as I slid it into the lock. With a groan of old metal, the safe opened, releasing a faint smell of paper, dust, and the lingering scent of Charles's cologne. Inside, stacks of leather-bound folders lined the shelves. Bank statements, investment records, property deeds. I pulled one free and gasped. Accounts in Zurich, Singapore, New York, numbers that blurred before my eyes, zeros that stretched across the page like endless rivers. At the bottom of the stack, tucked in an envelope yellowed with age, was a letter written in Charles's familiar, bold hand. My dearest Clara, if you are reading this, it means I am gone, and someone is trying to take advantage of your generous heart. Forgive me for not telling you sooner, but I lived modestly so that you could be wealthy, quietly and safely. I hid our fortune so that predators would overlook you, believing you had nothing worth taking. The true figure is just under $29 million. Every penny is legally shielded in trusts you control. No one, not even a husband, not even our daughter, can touch it without your permission. If anyone tries, contact Daphne Lenoir. She has been instructed, for years, to wait for your call. Do not fear being underestimated, my love. That is your greatest strength. And remember, wealth means nothing if you do not use it to protect yourself and those who cannot protect themselves. Yours, always, Charles. I sank into his old chair, the letter trembling in my hands. $29 million. protected, mine. The sheer weight of it pressed down on me like a tidal wave. My whole life I had lived quietly, frugally, content with a modest home and simple pleasures. All the while, Charles had been building an empire in secret, not to flaunt, not to waste, but to guard me against wolves, like Julian Cross. On the bottom shelf lay a tidy stack of business cards. I picked one up. Daphne Lenoir, attorney at law, Canal Street, New Orleans. I reached for the phone with fingers steadier than I expected. Peterson Law Office, a crisp voice answered. This is Clara Beaumont, I said. My voice was calm, but inside I was vibrating with energy. I believe my late husband instructed you to wait for my call. There was a pause, then a low, confident reply. Mrs. Beaumont, I've been waiting exactly 2 years for this moment. How soon can you come in? I looked again at Charles's letter, at the words he had left me, at the quiet storm gathering inside me. How soon, I said. Right now. Saturday afternoon arrived with the thick heat of a New Orleans summer, pressing against the windows, cicadas buzzing like a warning chorus. I set the stage carefully, as though preparing for a performance at the grandest theater. Charles's old study became my stage. The mahogany desk gleamed, a pot of chicory coffee steamed on the side table, and I, dressed in my soft gray dress and grandmother's pearls, was the perfect image of a vulnerable widow about to hand away her future. At precisely 3 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find Julian standing there with his briefcase, and a man in tow, thin and bespectacled, carrying a notary seal. Julian's smile beamed with triumph. Clara, he said warmly, I can't tell you how relieved I am that you've chosen to move forward. You'll never regret this. Come in, dear, I replied, my voice sweet as syrup. They settled into the study. Julian spread the papers across the desk, sliding the pen toward me with the confidence of a man certain the prey was cornered. The notary sat quietly, already prepping the seal. These documents, Julian began, his tone full of rehearsed gravitas, will give Isabel and me the ability to protect your interests. Financial, medical, legal. No more worries about making complex decisions on your own. How kind, I murmured, picking up the pen. My hand trembled deliberately. I signed the first page, then paused. Julian leaned forward, eager. Excellent. Just a few more and you'll be fully secure. I signed the second, then the third. He was practically vibrating with anticipation now, sweat glistening along his hairline. His eyes burned with greed. Julian, I said softly, setting the pen down. There's something I should mention. He froze. What's that? I let my voice drop to a whisper. There may be more money than you realize. The words hit him like a jolt of electricity. His eyes widened, his hands shook. More money? How much more? Charles may have had hidden accounts, investments. I never really understood it all, but the sum might be significant. His voice cracked. Significant how, Clara? Millions? Tens of millions? I tilted my head, watching the mask peel off his face. The smooth, confident lawyer vanished, replaced by a desperate man drowning in greed. Before I could answer, the heavy sound of boots filled the hallway. In an instant, the study door burst open. Detectives, prosecutors, and 2 federal agents stepped inside, badges flashing. Julian Cross, one of them barked. You are under arrest for attempted elder fraud and conspiracy to defraud a family member. The color drained from his face. What this is entrapment. You can't. Oh, but we can, the prosecutor said coolly, gathering the unsigned pages. And we will. The notary scrambled back, muttering he had no idea what was happening. Julian's briefcase tumbled to the floor, papers scattering like leaves in a storm. As the cuffs clicked shut around his wrists, he twisted to face me, his voice rising in a desperate scream. You'll regret this, old woman! This isn't over! I leaned back in Charles's chair, folding my hands calmly in my lap. Yes, I said, letting my voice carry over the chaos. It is. They dragged him past the magnolia trees lining my porch, his protests drowned out by the wail of sirens. I poured myself a small cup of coffee and sat in the quiet that followed, savoring the moment. Julian Cross thought he had trapped me. What he never realized was that I had been setting the trap all along. The news broke that evening. Every local station ran the footage. Julian Cross, handcuffed, his perfect suit wrinkled, his once brilliant smile replaced by panic, being led down my front steps like a petty thief caught in the act. The caption at the bottom of the screen read, "Prominent New Orleans attorney arrested in elder fraud sting." The phone rang before I could even set down my coffee. "Mom!" Isabel's voice was frantic, laced with disbelief. "What have you done? They're saying Julian, my husband, was arrested at your house. Tell me this isn't true." I closed my eyes, steadying myself. "It is true, Isabel. He came here with a notary to trick me into signing away everything your father left me. I had no choice." "You're exaggerating," she snapped. "He would never." "Sweetheart," I interrupted, my tone sharper than I intended. "I have recordings. Every word, every lie, every threat. He wasn't protecting me. He was hunting me." Silence. Then the faint sound of her sobbing. I don't know what to believe anymore. The following days were a blur of headlines and whispered gossip along Street Charles Avenue. The Cross family tried to salvage their reputation, but the cracks showed quickly. Patricia Cross stormed into my house one morning, her diamonds flashing like weapons. "You've destroyed my son's life," she declared, her voice trembling with rage. "No," I replied coolly. "Your son destroyed his own life when he decided to prey on widows." "He was helping you," she shrieked. "You'll regret dragging our family name through the mud." I smiled, calm and unbothered. I don't regret protecting myself, and I certainly don't regret exposing the truth. When the trial began 3 months later, the courtroom was packed. The state prosecutor laid out Julian's pattern in meticulous detail. Multiple widows in Louisiana and Mississippi who had signed away control of their finances after similar protective conversations. Some had lost homes, others their entire savings. One woman had been placed in a nursing facility against her will. The evidence was overwhelming. My recordings played before the jury, Julian's voice smooth and manipulative, promising security while plotting control. Each lie cut deeper, each word damning. Isabel sat behind me, pale and silent, her hands clutched in her lap. She didn't cry this time. She just listened, the truth burning through whatever illusions she had left. When Julian took the stand, he tried to paint himself as a misunderstood protector. His defense was polished, but his mask cracked under cross-examination. The prosecutor forced him to admit to debts, failed investments, and his growing desperation for quick access to funds. After only 2 hours of deliberation, the jury returned, guilty on all counts. The judge's words rang through the courtroom like a gavel on stone. "Julian Cross, you systematically targeted elderly women, exploiting their trust and attempting to rob them of their independence. You are sentenced to 16 years in federal prison." As the bailiff led him away, Julian turned his head, his eyes finding mine, seething with hatred. "This isn't over," he mouthed. I smiled sweetly, lifting my chin. "Yes," I whispered back, "it is." When the courtroom emptied, Isabel finally approached me, her face ashen but resolute. "You were right, Mom," she said softly. "He didn't love me. He loved what he thought I could give him." I touched her hand gently. "Sometimes, darling, losing someone is the first step toward saving yourself." That night, alone in Charles's study, I reread his letter. He had known this day would come. He had left me not only a fortune, but the strength to use it. And now, I realized, it wasn't just about protecting myself. It was about protecting others who couldn't fight back. The trial was over, but my battle was only beginning. Autumn settled over New Orleans like a velvet curtain, the air cooler, the streets lined with golden leaves. The trial was finished. Julian was gone, and the city's gossip began to fade into other scandals. But inside me, something new had taken root, a fire that refused to go out. Charles hadn't just left me $29 million. He had left me a weapon, a shield, a responsibility. And now, after watching Julian's smirk collapse into chains, I knew exactly what to do with it. I walked into Daphne Lenoir's office one morning, carrying Charles's letter. "It's time," I told her. "I want to use the trust, not for myself, for others." Her eyes lit up. "Others like you, widows, retirees, anyone who might be targeted." "Yes," I said firmly. "If predators think elderly women are easy prey, then let's make them afraid. Very afraid." Within weeks, we launched the Beaumont Foundation for Elder Justice. The first of its kind in Louisiana, it provided free legal defense, financial counseling, and investigative support to seniors at risk of exploitation. The newspapers ran headlines, "Widow turns fortune into fortress against fraud." Reporters called me the Dragon of Canal Street, and though I laughed at the nickname, part of me liked it. Isabel, after months of heartbreak, began volunteering at the foundation. She filed divorce papers quietly, with no grand announcement. One evening, as we packed boxes of pamphlets for an outreach event, she turned to me and whispered, "Mom, I'm sorry for not believing you, for not seeing what he really was." I touched her cheek. "You saw what you needed to at the time, but you found the courage to walk away. That matters more than anything." By spring, the foundation had helped recover over $5 million for elderly victims across the state. More importantly, it had exposed a network of fraudsters linked directly to Julian's associates. Federal investigators credited our work for unraveling schemes stretching across 3 states. Then came the twist Charles must have foreseen. Julian's so-called mentor, a man named Victor Holloway, was arrested. He'd been orchestrating elder fraud schemes for 20 years. His downfall made national news. The Department of Justice called, asking me to testify before Congress. Standing in that marble hall in Washington, I looked straight into the cameras and said, "To every criminal who thinks age means weakness, remember this. We are not helpless. We are not invisible. We are your worst mistake." The applause thundered through the chamber, and in that moment, I felt Charles with me, proud, amused, whispering, "I told you they'd underestimate you." Months later, back in my garden beneath the spreading magnolia tree, I read a letter from one of the women we'd helped. "You gave me back my savings, but more importantly, you gave me back my dignity. Thank you for reminding me that we do not have to be victims." I folded the letter, holding it close to my heart. Julian Cross thought he had trapped me. He thought I was nothing more than a fragile widow, waiting to be guided. Instead, he handed me the chance to become something more. A protector, a fighter, a beacon for others who had been silenced too long. The lesson is simple, but it is carved into me like scripture. Never underestimate someone just because they seem small, quiet, or old. Sometimes the weakest-looking prey has sharper teeth than the hunter ever imagined. And those teeth, well, once they bite, they never let go.